My name is Loki Holgard. Um, I got into veganism when I was, I don't know what age it would be. It'd be sort of like in my late 20s, maybe the age of 27 or 28. And I basically got into it because I was on a raw paleo diet before that, um, where I did a raw paleo diet for 2 years, but I think I probably just did it wrong. And I got sort of paranoid about all the propaganda from people like Andreas Moritz and so forth in his timeless secrets of health and rejuvenation and so on. And basically I became paranoid about getting cancer states and so forth. And so I said, well, maybe vegan, blah, blah, blah. So within a couple days, basically 2 days, I first said, okay, I'm going to do vegan right now. And then I immediately switched, but I still incorporated eggs for about 2 days. Then from that point, I said, okay, vegan now. And then I dumped all the eggs. And then I continued on this vegan agenda for the 3 years. I had one interruption in which I had about 3 cans of sardines because around 9 months into it, I was sort of sensing that, something's really wrong here. This is not really appropriate. And I had never done any vegan or vegetarian diets before in my life, except when I was a teenager, which is sort of what ties into basically my health document that I wrote explains everything. And I guess he'll link it below. So that'll explain in copious detail all the minutiae of, these issues for me and my personal experience. So basically, I went on this diet. First, I was having nothing but sort of following a Gabriel Cousin style diet with mixed in with Andreas Moritz, some starches, but at the same time, quite a lot of fat, like coconut oil. And it would just be like big bowl of rice with coconut oil and some vegetables and sprouts and stuff like this. And I became I was always obsessed with health to the extreme from about the age of 14. And so basically within this time, around 2012, I was getting into sort of new age philosophy and so forth and, buying into all the propaganda related to all this talk about trying to purify your body and, become, I guess, a superior immortal in some sort of like esoteric sense or something of that sort. So I was obsessed with body purification. I was doing coffee enemas and doing all these other sorts of purification or alleged purification techniques, even drinking like Epsom salt drinks and having all sorts of other crazy drinks like mixing turmeric with maple syrup and cayenne pepper and all sorts of crazy things that I would drink. And basically during this time, it was pretty much sort of starches plus oils plus nuts and seeds, and I would have to have the nuts and seeds be extremely high quality. I'd buy them on the internet. They would be in their shell. I had to freeze them. Then I had to, specially prepare all the food and so forth. And I found eventually it wasn't really working. So I was speculating, well, it's too high fat a diet, so maybe I should, because I became more or less capable of lifting weights. Prior to that, I was very involved in weightlifting during the course of my paleo time, which was basically for 2 years of raw paleo. I was doing extremely high amounts of bodybuilding and heavy weightlifting and walking around with weight vests and so forth. And so basically during this time, I guess I burnt myself out because I'd work out like every day, 2 times a day with weights for about 6 months or so. And so I became extremely debilitated. So that might have been one of the reasons why I switched to vegan. And so from there, basically, it wasn't working out on vegan. So I said, well, maybe it's too much fat. So maybe we should do an 80-10-10. I stumbled upon that sort of propaganda with Douglas Graham and Durian Ryder and all the fruitarian type propaganda. And so from there, I said, yeah, maybe this will be the way. All it's got to do is be 100% raw and ripe local organic fruits and vegetables, 80-10-10, high carb. Wasn't working after a certain period of time. I was having as much as like 17 bananas a day or a meal and so forth, and eating like, the huge amounts of dates, basically almost a pound of dates at a meal. And then from there, it wasn't working within even, a few days or a week or so. So I basically switched over to the Dr. McDougall starch solution type diet. And so that basically, I was having huge amounts of rice and stuff like this. And I would walk around outside trying to get some sunshine. And I had, the big biafran belly, big swollen sac for digestive tract with starch and so forth. And then I was always trying to purge myself with enemas because it would always be so bloated. I would have to try to reduce the bloat by, clearing the path, I guess you could say. And so I became addicted to coffee enemas. Basically, I was doing them every single day, and I would basically have clear myself with the urine enemas, and then I would have a coffee enema afterwards. And I even, I'd ozonate it and stuff like that. And then even sometimes I got into it, so I'd have beet juice enemas and so forth, thinking that would, nourish me in some way. But the thing is, it just basically caused diabetic, some type of diabetic reaction or something. Because, you get the sugar right in your bloodstream, huge amounts of sugar from all the beet juice. So it basically put me on almost insulin shock at that time. So basically, I was still eating the high-carb, super high-carb diet. I'd have 85% carbohydrate diet. I'd have first meal would be 400 grams of dates. I'd have on the side of that, I'd have some ground chlorella tablets mixed with some beet powder with some water added in. And I was involved in all sorts of other health protocols. I live in the countryside at that time, and I would have sort of everything would be extremely pure. The water was well water. I'd have only at least reverse osmosis water. I'd give myself foot baths with Epsom salts and so forth, and various other yogic techniques and heat lamps, near infrared heat lamps, saunas and so forth, magnet therapy, all simultaneously together sort of. And then basically, so the first meal I'd have pretty much nothing but dates. And then in the second one, it would be 200 grams in raw terms of lentils. And then with some maybe a couple ounces of hemp seeds, and then a bunch of cooked vegetables. And this would be just a huge bolus of food that would make me extremely sluggish. But obviously, I was trying to make it work, so I basically forced myself to continue to endure this horrible bloatation and digestive stress. And then after that, basically, it was another repeat at the supper meal. It was another bolus of huge amounts of about 200 grams dried weight of starches, or it was 2.5 pounds of potatoes with some, cooked vegetables on the side and so forth, maybe 2 ounces of chia seeds ground up in water, or, mixed together in water, or hemp seeds or something like this. And basically that was the pretty much the template of the diet for the remainder of the time until I started falling apart to a great extent. And then at that time, I couldn't even do cardio. So one time I went to the gym and I was sort of bloated as usual, trying to do exercise. And I couldn't even go on the cardio machines for more than about 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, that's it. And as soon as I came to that conclusion, I went to a Chinese grocery store and I bought some eggs and some sardine cans, and I immediately ate that, and I immediately felt better at that time. So at that time I said, okay, definitively vegan won't work. But at the same time, I didn't really know what to do in terms of diet. So I was trying to combine it. I was mixing it together, having, still too much starch, or maybe any starch at all. Because at this time, I still don't entirely, have not come to any definitive conclusions as to what exactly in terms of diet is the proper direction, if there is any such thing as a proper direction to head in. So basically that wasn't working. So I was still bouncing back and forth, trying to talk to people like Dr. What is his name, McDougall on the internet and so forth, and his little cronies and all these other vegan gurus, trying to find out, is this the way, is that the way? So I got some hair mineral consultation with Dr. what's his name? Dr. L. Wilson, Dr. Larry Lawrence Wilson. He's the guy who prescribes lots of coffee enemas, and he prescribes huge amounts of cooked vegetables and stuff like this. So I was thinking, well, maybe this is the way to go. So I got my hair mineral analysis for like $1,000 or something like that. And I had to grow my hair to send in the hair and stuff like this. And then it was just showing up that there's huge amounts of aluminum in the hair, so probably from chemtrails or something like that, or who knows what. And so that didn't seem to work out. All these, huge amounts of vegetables and butter and animal products, basically what he prescribed with some grains and so forth. And so that didn't work, and I was back and forth ever since that time, even up to this very moment, when I just, for the most part, concluded in the last, maybe several weeks, or even in the last 2 weeks, that starches are basically not appropriate for human digestive physiology. And I'm familiar with your channel because I've listened to your videos for about a year or something like that. So I'm aware of all the theories of all the different diets, basically, the whole spectrum of dieting, which I've discussed also in that book, the health book, HELL-TH. And basically, at this present time, I would say probably your direction is proper, maybe. At the very least, you have to have a base level of animal products, preferably raw, like Agenus vonderplanets. And I would say possibly, but only possibly, fruits are acceptable in a diet. And, cooked vegetables possibly are also. Those are the, I guess, provisional conclusions that I've come to at this point. But once again, I'm not entirely sure exactly what is best, because every time I continue to try to revert back to a keto diet, I never really seem to make it work for some reason. Not too sure exactly why, but maybe it's just a lack of perseverance or something like that. So I'm not really too sure, but basically, for the most part, that's my story for vegan. I tried 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, 3, 4, whatever meals a day. I tried intermittent fasting. I tried super high carbohydrate diet, food combining, having raw sprout diets like Brian Clement and that Ann Wigmore orientation. I tried following Gabriel Cousin's so-called alleged ketogenic raw vegan diet, where everything is just basically like a bunch of coconut oil and, allegedly some nuts somehow don't put you out of ketosis, but obviously they would, because they have lots of carbohydrates in them if you have adequate quantities. So basically his claims are obviously false, and given that he's a rabbi, I'm not too sure I trust the guy, basically. So then there's the Gabriel, or what's his name, Victoris Kolbinskas, with his sproutarian diet and so forth. And my experiences for fruitarian is basically that my teeth became almost rotten. Like when I'd consistently go on a fruitarian diet for maybe a week, my teeth would become totally brown around the gum line and so forth, and on tops and everything, which is obviously, I guess, a sign of tooth decay or something. I'm not really too sure. So for the most part, I can definitively say that a fruitarian diet would be pretty much a death diet over time. Obviously, your videos on vegan malnutrition pretty much prove that, because all the skeletal figures, they're, distorted features and so forth, looking like POWs in a concentration camp. Obviously, that's not really the way to go. But clearly, all people have to do is just, follow this diet for a very short time, and they can easily see through their own personal experience that it's pretty much a death diet. And even though some people persevere and like are hardcore people, I guess you could say, like myself, sort of very intense people who insist upon trying to come to the ultimate conclusions of things in a theoretical way and through experience. At the same time, it's basically impossible for anybody to persevere in this without undergoing obvious signs of physical degeneration, and there's obviously more than enough evidence to prove that convincingly to more or less anybody who has any intelligence. All they have to do is just look at the obvious fact of existence.
One question,
Yeah.
were you also into morals? Did you believe that killing animals is wrong, or was it all about health?
Well, basically, it was predominantly about health for me from the beginning, because obviously just before that, I had been eating raw animal products. I had, at that time during my paleo days, I had basically a dozen raw eggs a day and about a pound of raw ground beef every day and so forth. So I didn't actually, when I was on that diet, I was becoming almost psychopathic, because I don't know, it didn't really seem like I had any regard at all for animal life for some reason. But then when I went on a vegan diet, I became sort of sucked in this sort of weird way that I became sucked into this moralizing attitude where basically I was thinking always in terms of, the earth and so forth, and that I was a superior mortal because I was doing something which didn't harm the earth. So my morality, I guess you could say, was a negative value system where I based my morality or my essence, my nature on not doing things. So it was sort of like my virtue consisted of purely negative things, not doing this and not doing that, which was basically diametrically opposed to what I had previously adhered to in terms of ethics, which were more centered around, excellence and trying to improve myself and, living in accordance with nature and doing positive things like through creative activity and so forth. So I seem to get sucked into it somehow, mainly through the propaganda, but at the same time, I don't know, it just seemed to be become sort of fixated upon this as like a mantra or some type of obviously like a religious cult for the most part, the vegan, that it's pretty much cultish in its nature. So
What do you think is the future of veganism? You probably have a lot to say about it, so maybe just sum it up.
the future of veganism, well, basically I would say like anything in this world at this very time in history, all the events that are going on, it's basically coming to a point where all the talk about trying to stand above nature will disappear, and ultimately only the strongest will survive. So either people will assert themselves, even if need be on a physical basis, to defend their lives against what's going on in the world, or else they will be pretty much starved to death through gradual means. Like all of these obviously are agendas that are orchestrated from above by the people who control society from behind the scenes, and that the vegan diet, as your shirt says, is basically the death diet, go vegan and die. So obviously that's what their intentions are, is to try to weaken the populace. As I had said in one of my videos on one of my channels, the vegan die-it, sort of synopsizing what's going on in this movement, or as the movement, as a psyop, that basically their intent is to reduce the fertility of people and to brainwash them and target them with emotionally based propaganda as a means of getting them to commit suicide under the guise of goodness or morality, which is just sort of like a representation of Christian values, I guess you could say. Sort of, store up treasures in heaven and give everybody your cloak, turn the other cheek, basically bow down like a slave to other people and let them rule you, because that way you can prove that you're better somehow, and this is virtue. So it's basically the virtues of self-destruction or suicide. So suicide morality is what vegan is another form of, pretty much. And that's why they've always used that in occult circles, I guess, for their slaves. The guru is always having everybody be celibates on the vegan diet, while the guru hypocritically basically has got a whole harem full of people, and they're probably, like you said in some of your videos, are probably drinking baby blood out of goat skulls, or who knows what they're doing, right? So you can never be sure. But obviously the masses are just pretty much on the chopping block right now. There's the Georgia Guidestones where they want to reduce the population by 95% or something of that sort. And so this is just a means. It's basically taking what they've been doing in the third world for quite a while into the first world so that they can reduce the first world to the standards of the third world in this sort of secret process, claiming, using the argument that there's only a scarcity of resources, and on the basis of the fact that, quote unquote, everybody is equal, therefore they're entitled to basically, ration out your food supply on the basis of quantity, of equality, so-called. But obviously there's no such thing as equality in nature. So that's a false premise. But the thing is, it's a question of whether they can get away with it or not. And so obviously the average person needs to, you know, fight with their wallet, I guess you could say, by buying meat from local organic sources, farmers and so forth, and then ideally protesting in the streets and so forth eventually, but if they want to. Otherwise, it might wind up in a sort of Turner Diaries style situation where basically in the end it's, you know, kill or be killed literally in the streets, where the people will end up cannibalizing themselves and only the strongest will become the victor and they will be the ones to continue to survive. So I see that that will be inevitably the conclusion that will occur, that either people will find more peaceable or less life-threatening means of creating changes to enable themselves to survive. Otherwise, they're going to be faced with the zombie apocalypse type Dawn of the Dead scenario where they'll basically have to fight to live type of thing. I think that that inevitably will happen within the next decade as well, because so far as I know, the plans of the people who control society are to have the, what is it called? Forget exactly what it's called. Something to do with Agenda 21, the 2020 plan, I guess you could say, that they're going to try to have all these smart cities and smart this and that in place for 2020. But at least 2030 is probably when that's going to occur, because I think that there's also all sorts of like cosmic changes coming on, like Earth changes. Edgar Casey and all these other predictions and prophets allegedly are proving or prophesying that this sort of thing will happen within this time frame, like around the late 2020s. So if that is what occurs, inevitably, then it will just be survival of the fittest. But one way or the other, people are not going to be able to sit around on a pedestal and moralize as if you have a choice. Like you can talk about human rights and all this other man-made concepts, but the reality is ultimately it's just might is right, and whoever has the resources or the means to have those resources, they'll either have it or else they'll be, the opponent will try to take them out and replace them with whoever they can use or just get rid of them altogether. So I see that being the future, basically.
Did you read the book Might is Right?
Yeah, I have that book actually. I got it from osterapublications.com. That's a good source for a similar type of works, like eugenics works and so forth, based in England.
Yeah, somebody gave it to me. I'm supposed to read it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. There's also YouTube videos on it as well. So people, if they don't have the time to read, I think it's like maybe 6 hours. So you can just listen to it through that means. And that's what I try to do on some of my channels. I try to like do audiobooks of books so that people can just read or, take the information in very quickly. If they're doing their dishes or whatever, then they don't have to waste their time reading and so forth. So try to spread the messages I'm trying to spread to people.
Anything else you would like to add? Any important experience or something that vegans should hear? Anything like that?
Basically, it's difficult to say. There's not really any one source. There's a website, beyondveg.com, I believe, is a fair website that explains people's experiences. Basically, just listen to your channel and your videos and the Ancestral Health Symposium, Natasha Campbell McBride, Weston A. Price Foundation, sources of that sort. Even if you have a mixed diet and you're not against vegetables and fruits and so forth, at the same time, you pretty much have to have animal products. And vegan is just a fast diet, so you may as well just go on a water fast, because that way you're not contaminating your body with vegetables and starch and becoming sort of gaseous and bloated and so forth. So basically, I would say to people, there are all sorts of synopses of these sorts of things, and Spheria's channel is pretty good. So that's a good source, a good, quick, and convenient way to gather the data, basically, I would say.
Yeah, well said. Anything else?
At the present moment, I would say for people, I'm not going to say that you should relocate to the countryside if you have the means to do so, to sort of run away from the cities and so forth. But it might be good if people have money, if they want to pool their money together, to set up cooperatives or some type of, communal, whatever, farmland situation amongst yourselves so that you can, escape in the event of hardship in the cities, and you can go and set up there and have some type of hobby farm for yourselves, like chicken coops and so forth. And uh, that obviously is necessary at this time to ensure your own personal survival, to stockpile food, such as myself, I have here, stockpiled a bunch of sardine cans and uh, peanut butter jars, even though obviously peanut butter is probably not very good because of aflatoxin and so forth, but you can stockpile ghee jars or, whatever, wax eggs and cheese and so forth. So stockpile food for yourself because there's obviously going to be extremely chaotic circumstances coming in the near future. So if you want to have a future, then better stop wasting your money on liquor and stuff and invest it in food and guns and firearms, because if I had not invested my money in food right at this time, I could be basically in a state of starvation, because in my case that I have for hate speech, the police took basically over $2,000 of my money, which I had, because I had stamped on it Jewish white genocide on all the bills because I was spreading it around as propaganda messages. And so, now I have no money, I have nothing. So basically, I could have been in a state of starvation if I hadn't stockpiled food. So that's basically the advice I would give to people is preparedness is the key, as Sun Tzu said. So make sure you prepare for the future or else you won't have a future. Basically it.
Hmm.
Yep.
All right, man. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your
All right.
story and everything.